Like the Americans, the Soviets also believed it was feasible to establish a lunar base. And as far back as 1957, Russian professors from the Soviet Academy of Sciences had expressed that a moon base could be a reality sooner or later. In the early 1960s, following cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin's success aboard Vostok 1, Sergei Korolev, the brilliant mind behind the entire Soviet space program, took on the project to potentially raise an outpost on the moon's surface. Korolev discussed the idea with several scholars and specialists in 1962 and even published an article in Pravda, the primary publication of the Communist Party. However, the matter took a serious tone until 1967, when the Soviets were working on the powerful N-1 rocket, and thanks to Korolev's suggestions, the K-bomb Design Bureau began gathering information to establish a lunar base. The Bureau first contacted biologists, doctors, architects, astronomers, and atomic experts to study the project's feasibility. Then, in 1969, K-bomb issued a report titled Principles of the Construction of Long-Functioning Lunar Settlements, which proposed building a lunar base in 3 phases. The base would only be habitable for a crew of 4 at first, but would increase to 12 when the last section of the settlement was built. It would have a common area, an astronomy lab, a power supply center, a vehicle depot, and auxiliary facilities, and would also include life support, power, thermal control, communication systems, a gym, and a kitchen. The facilities would be buried under layers of regolith to conceal and protect them from meteorites and radiation, and its total mass was estimated at 52,000 kilograms, which would be delivered through the N-1 rocket. In 1970, K-bomb began building a full-scale mock-up of one of the lunar modules to test different technologies and assets for the project. Unfortunately, things didn't go as expected with the powerful N-1 rocket that would carry all the materials required to build the Soviet moon base. After several launch attempts, the N-1 project was suspended in 1974 while its engineers figured out what had gone wrong, and the K-bomb Bureau was forced to stop the lunar base program until the N-1 delivered results. Still, not all hope was lost for the desired Soviet moon base. Following the suspension of the N-1 program, the government appointed Valentin Glushko as the head of Energia, the leading manufacturer and developer of Soviet spacecraft. Although Glushko vehemently wished to terminate the N-1 rocket, he was pleased to continue with the creation of a lunar settlement. In 1974, Energia released a proposal for its own lunar base that was codenamed Zvezda, or Star, and that would be delivered to the moon aboard the new Vulcan heavy-lift rocket. This rocket could deliver 230 tons to low Earth, 60 tons to the moon's orbit, and 22 tons to the lunar surface, while the payload would consist of the LEK, or Lunar Expeditionary Complex, and a lunar transport craft. The LEK spacecraft consisted of the landing stage for the moon's descent, the ascent stage for taking off from the lunar surface, and the re-entry stage for returning to Earth. It weighed 31 tons and comprised a 20-ton laboratory and habitation module of 160 cubic meters, of which 25 square meters were reserved for habitation and 25 for laboratory usage. The module was 9 meters tall and had a width of a little more than 8 meters. It was powered by a solar panel unit that could generate electricity. The third complex was a 15-ton laboratory and production module that stood 5 meters tall and gave access to a biotechnology and physics laboratory with a 3-ton oxygen-generating facility. The entire Soviet moon-base complex would be powered by a nuclear power unit. A Lunokhod lunar rover was the last asset of the Zvezda moon base. The 8-ton vehicle, with a capacity for 2, would have a speed of 5 kilometers per hour and an approximate range of 200 kilometers. Before the deployment of the base, the desired zone would be meticulously mapped by an unmanned lunar spacecraft. Afterward, the base would begin construction in 3 phases, of which the first 2 would require 5 Vulcan rocket launches to carry all the equipment and essential materials. The last phase would take place 2 months after Phase 2 and carry the remaining laboratory equipment. Unfortunately, Glushko's ambitious proposal did not convince the Soviet government. After noticing that the Americans did not establish any moon bases during its 7 lunar Apollo expeditions, the government rejected the local project. Instead, the Soviets put their focus on copying the footprints of the American space shuttle. The project was also abandoned because it would cost at least $80 billion in 1980s currency. However, the Russians' ambition to establish a moon base did not entirely go away, and in the late 2010s, Russia's Federal Space Agency began gathering information to consider building a future base on the moon.